Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Broadband Bunch Zero Touch Learning Series. Thanks for joining us. I'm Joe Coldabella. Today's session is entitled Bridging the Gap Between Broadband and Real Estate. The Broadband Bunch podcast and Zero Touch Learning Series is brought to you, as always, by your Zero Touch automation experts, ETI Software, along with Utopia Fiber, DXTEL, Calix, and the ITK Solutions Group. Be sure to follow the Broadband Bunch on Twitter at Podcast Bunch. We're also on LinkedIn. Just type in Broadband Bunch in the search bar. You can also listen to the Broadband Bunch podcast on your favorite podcast platform, on Spotify, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, on Apple Podcasts. We're on them all. A quick reminder before we introduce our guest today. This session is being recorded like all sessions. It's also available on our website, broadbandbunch.com, under the Webinars tab. Please feel free to submit potential topics for future Zero Touch Learning Series sessions or suggest prospective panelists. Thanks in advance for watching. Now, I'm excited to introduce our host, Kaylee Cox. Kaylee is the Vice President of Business Development and Content Operations at DXTEL. Kaylee helps telecommunications companies, rural cooperatives, and other providers engage their target audience and reach their goals. Kaylee, take it away.
Thank you, Joe. I am excited to be here and excited to discuss the rural broadband industry, the real estate industry, and how we can bridge the gap between the two. I'm going to start by just asking each panelist to introduce themselves in a sentence or two. Robert Gilbert, can we start with you?
Sure. Again, my name's Robert Gilbert. I founded DXTEL along with my business partner 4 years ago, and we recently launched a platform called Fiber Homes to help add some transparency to the real estate industry from the fiber broadband side.
Thanks. I'm going to move right across my screen here. Josh, can you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Thank you. Josh Seidemann, Vice President of Policy of the NTCA, Rural Broadband Association. We represent about 800 to 850 locally operated small rural broadband providers in all parts of rural America. We focus on, obviously, the nuts and bolts regulatory issues, but also the follow-on strengths of broadband as they affect many industry sectors, including real estate.
And Robert Zuzek.
Good afternoon. Yeah, Robert Zuzek, Director of Business Development for Lakeland Communications, and thanks for the invite on this panel. I'm also as a side hustle, been a licensed real estate agent in Wisconsin and Minnesota for the last 18 years.
And Chad Mix.
I am Chad Mix. I'm the marketing director for Nervado, which is a small rural telecom company in Northwest Wisconsin. We are a cooperative that serves about 15,000 customers.
Awesome. Thank you all for being here. You bring a nice diversity of experience on this topic, and we're excited to discuss this with you. I wanted to start with you, Chad. From our perspective, and when I say our, I work with Robert on Fiber Homes, we really saw Nervado as a forerunner in terms of ISPs engaging the local real estate community. A lot of what you were doing inspired what we're doing now with Fiber Homes. Could you tell us a bit about how that began and why you saw a need to engage your local real estate community in the first place?
Sure. So prior to Fiber Homes, we had our own real estate program. I guess that's what we deemed it, where we were trying to incentivize our real estate agents and the real estate companies in our territory to indicate in their listings whether or not a home had fiber or not. And we put together sort of a real estate package that we sent to all of the real estate agents that we are working with that included, yard signs to say, hey, this is a fiber home, when they put up, a for sale sign in the yard, little badges that they could attach to, the listings to indicate that it's a fiber home. And the reason for that is that the consumer really demands it, right? Today, it's not very often that someone can go buy a house in a rural market and not have super high-speed internet because of all of the school and work from home and remote working. We also worked with the governor in Wisconsin and several other people in the legislative organization, I guess, to create, rural broadband communities and, kind of work from home communities. And so we know that our particular area is a recreational area. It's a place where people come to vacation, enjoy their time with family, and they could spend a lot more time there if they had connectivity, right, and good connectivity. So we wanted to make sure that people knew they could work from home, that we had the connectivity to support their needs, and get more people moving, staying, vacationing, having a second home in our area.
And what was it like when you started rolling this out and engaging local real estate agents? What kind of reception did you get?
Well, I think they were all very interested, right? They do know that the consumer demand is there. Having them actually engage on a full scale is challenging, right? Because we are a small marketing staff, and I think, of course, you have to stay in contact with them. But what we did have a lot of success was them using our mapping and our addressing to check for their clients whether or not fiber was available and what kind of speed was there. We had a little bit harder time getting them to include the badges and so the consumer could self-identify what was happening. But so it was always a work in progress, but we offered an incentive for the consumer to go to a fiber home where they could have gigabit free for a certain number of months. And so I think the partnership was good. I think moving forward, it's going to be better.
And we're excited to talk about that. Before we get too much into that, I do want to bring Robert Zuzek in here because he's, as he mentioned in his intro, kind of a good bridge already between the two industries. So Robert, from your perspective, how important is it for real estate agents to understand internet availability? Are home buyers asking questions? Tell us a little bit about your perspective on that.
Thanks for that question, and I think it's an important question because though there's a lot of independent companies and cooperatives out there building fiber for years, and it's kind of the on-the-go trend right now is rural broadband and extensions and things like that. But there's a lot of network already being built. But I think the disserviced or maybe the lack of knowledge on both the consumer on what they're really looking for, and especially for the real estate agent on what they should be asking and what the customer or their client is doing in the home that they want to buy in a marketplace. In Polk County, where we are, we're about 45 minutes to an hour out of Minneapolis and lake area, plus a rural setting. So there's a lot of network or areas that are underserved. And if the agents aren't asking the right questions, or if the customer or their client isn't pointing out that they're going to work from the home, they can really get caught into a situation where they're not going to have the robust bandwidth that they need really to do what they have to work from home, to school from home, and things like that. So, we're working with the real estate group on that also. But I think it's really educating both parties and the real estate agents and asking those right questions when they're starting to work with that client or that new consumer of theirs.
And if a real estate agent gets questions, someone says, I work from home, I need internet, where do they go typically to figure that out? I mean, you work at an ISP, so you have a leg up there, but what do others do? Yeah,
and it's very difficult. There are some websites that you can go and see maps on what kind of providers are available, but it's a challenge. Even on the MLS, as I search and look for market or addresses in our market, I found only one in Polk County that had fiber to the home that was in the listing. Now, a number of them showed DSL. Well, again, DSL in a rural setting is not going to support what a customer is going to need to work from home or school from home. So again, I think it's educating the MLS, it's educating real estate agents and their the owners of their operations to really take that to the next level. So that is, they are moving somebody into a beautiful home on Deer Lake, that there is the connectivity that that person needs to, spend more time at that lake cabin, because as we all know, people have migrated and they're continuing to now work. If there's high-speed data, they're staying at the cabin, they're staying in the rural setting, and they're not commuting back to the metro if they were before.
And before we got on this panel, you sent me a really interesting news article that was local to you, I believe, that talked about kind of the pressure that falls on real estate agents to get the answer right, and what happens when they don't. Can you kind of share that story with us?
Sure. So this was not in our particular market, but it was in Wisconsin. It was actually in the Milwaukee area or outside of that Milwaukee area. So again, you would think they're going to have high-speed data all over the place. But a person moves in, buys, I think it was like a $700 and some thousand home, working with the agent. The agent says, yes, there's broadband there. What turns out that there was DSL there, and rural DSL is not like metro DSL. So they just did not have the bandwidth. And she was a therapist working remotely, needing to work remotely, and kind of got caught in a situation where she bought this home but can't work remotely, and then found that Spectrum was a mile away, and I think it was AT&T was too far away to bring broadband. Satellite wasn't going to work for her. So they just talked about all the dilemma that she was in. So she was helping the homeowner is trying to educate people on the situation she got caught into. So again, that agent maybe did not understand the business well enough or what broadband was to really answer that question. Though she said there was broadband, again, it was DSL that is not the same DSL as you may find in Milwaukee, in this rural setting where this individual moved to. And you'll find that elsewhere too. So again, it's knowing that if it is DSL, what's the speed? If it's fiber to the home, you can be assured some things, but even, with the state and the federal government rolling out money, they're putting broadband at a certain level. But I think even as that moves forward, that is even increasing so that it's somewhat future-proof into the future.
Certainly. Yeah, there's a lot we could talk about from that, right? There's the fact that the home buyer knew to ask, but the agent didn't have enough education to really answer it correctly. The data they had wasn't provided by providers, so it ended up not really being reliable. And so, yeah, and then you get into how to even define, right, adequate broadband and things like that. Robert Gilbert, I wanted to kind of bring you in here. You started Fiber Homes to provide some of that education and a tool for real estate agents. Could you just kind of tell us a little bit about what Fiber Homes is and how real estate agents are using it?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, these stories are exactly why we started Fiber Homes. I had a background in real estate also, and we were hearing the same stories, especially after the pandemic, with more and more home buyers. We were seeing in our real estate company asking questions about internet. And then we were hearing from agents and also MLS directors that, there was not a reliable place for them to go to find that information. And I'm sure Robert can appreciate this, but agents are not going to want to go out on a limb and promise something that they're not absolutely sure about to their buyers, and certainly not put it in a listing. And MLSs are obviously legally obligated not to do that either. So we were hearing this need on the real estate side, and meanwhile on the DXTEL side, working with rural fiber providers all over the country, because we were the marketing firm, had access to their addressable data and realized, wait a second, this information exists here, and these people need this information. And that's really where the idea of Fiber Homes was born. It's how can we create an easy to use and a free tool for real estate agents at a local level to use and very quickly determine fiber internet availability, as well as other internet availability options as well at a specific address. And then big picture, how can we take all of this data and work with the area associations, the statewide realtor groups, and the MLSs to, kind of build up this awareness that this data is very important.
And how are you inspired by Norvado's example in terms of what to put in the hands of real estate agents?
Yeah, Chad was, a huge help starting out. We had a lot of conversations and loved what they did with their seal and all of the real estate engagement. And I think early on in a phone call, Chad pointed out that one of their big challenges was getting the real estate agents to actually use the badge and use that information on their own websites, on the listings. So that kind of stuck with me. And then, we started having a lot of conversations on the real estate side. And it really came down to the fact that the majority of agents don't manage their own websites. And they certainly, if they do, they don't really have to know how to add something easily to their website. So, that's where this kind of aha moment of, what, we've got to get to the MLS level, because that's where all of the data starts. And that's where all of the data that populates those agents' websites pulls from that MLS. And so if we're going to really make a meaningful impact in the real estate industry with this very important data, we needed to go to the ultimate source of where that, where all of that, where the authority was, I guess, with the MLS.
And then what are you doing? So, you're putting stuff together for the agents and making it where it's right in front of them. On the internet provider side, what are you able to provide to ISPs like Norvado, like Lakeland, to help them actually push this out and explain it to agents? What does that process look like?
Sure. Yeah. And again, we, learned a lot from Chad and what his team was already doing at Norvado, but, everything from providing them with campaign materials that they can use locally with their agents, co-branded materials they can push out, talking them through and helping them engage with the local association. We have found the associations are very happy about the tool. Once they find out it's free, then it's very popular. They know it's something that's needed. And if we can get the association engaged, then that really takes all the pressure off the ISP, because that association will then really promote the tool to all of its members. So yeah, really any way we can get the word out as part of Fiber Homes for our subscribers, then we provide them with as many of the marketing materials as they need to get their local agents on board.
Now I want to zoom out here in a minute and bring Josh in and talk about some of the economic development play here. But before I do, I wanted to kind of come back to Chad and to Robert Zuzek and ask, what kind of advice do you have for other ISP marketers, in your shoes to engage local real estate agents? What have you learned and what kind of advice would you pass on? I'll start with you, Chad.
Yeah, I think it's like any other marketing, right? It's not a one and done. You'll be forgotten. So I think it's important that for us, we have someone assigned to the real estate project, whether it was our own or we're now using Fiber Homes, to make sure that we're communicating with all the agents in our area. Now, we're a small area, so that's manageable. But we're sending them information via email and direct mail. We're reaching out personally and communicating with them. And the reason is pretty simple. I think I had a little bit of a challenge explaining this internally, what the benefit is. And it's someone is buying a house in our area for vacationing, generally for a second home. And they are an internet subscriber or a phone subscriber, a television subscriber, and they can choose to go anywhere, right? So they can go to the town next door or they can go to our town. And one major differentiator is the internet that's provided in a Norvado territory versus, one of the other ILECs. And so it's such a benefit to us to help promote the growth of our area, which in turn grows our subscriber base just by having a product that the consumers want. So we have a lot of people coming from Minneapolis and Milwaukee and Chicago and Appleton and all over, and they don't understand. They expect that they have the same resources they would in a metropolitan area. And in most places in northern Wisconsin, they don't. But in a Norvado territory, they do. And so it's a huge benefit to us for increased sales. but it's also a huge benefit to the agent for increased sales, because they can either buy from somebody that's in a different territory that's the real estate broker of that area, or they can get them to buy in their territory where they are the real estate broker, where maybe they have the listing and the sale, right? Or whatever those deals are, but it's certainly a benefit for them and a big differentiation point, which grows our business. So we want to make sure the real estate agents are up to speed. We want to make sure they have all the tools. We're promoting all this stuff on our website and making it easy, but they certainly can go to Fiber Homes too. And so, you know, I think there's a win-win on win-win-win really. Real estate agents, you know, have a incentive and a reason to push this. We do, and certainly the consumer wants it.
Do you know off the top of your head what that URL is for your Realtor landing page?
Yeah, it's norvado.com/real estate.
I would just highly recommend, if there are any ISP marketers out there watching this, to check that out, because I know you updated it recently and it's just really well done, and I think really helpful and easy to understand. So just a great example. And I like a lot of what you touched on with the kind of the economic play, and we're going to come back to that in just a second. But first, Robert Zuzek, from your perspective, both as an agent and as, you know, an ISP employee, what would be your advice to ISPs that are looking to bridge this gap?
Well, a lot of what Chad said is right on. And I think the more time you spend educating the real estate agents, educating your community on the need for broadband, getting involved in economic development, getting involved with the county. But we continue to expand our network as our peers are also. So bringing that information, making sure that our real estate groups have all the current information on our speeds, on our packages, so that when they are talking to a customer and they're looking at moving into one area of our island where there's a lake home, they know what's available immediately. They can go to our website and find that. They have a link to that. I like the idea of the landing page for the realtor, you know, borrow that. But, you know, education and communications, and like Chad said, it's not just one stop and done. It's continued communications with that group. And, you know, there are not that we're in a tighter, smaller county, but, you know, we have roughly 5,000 customers. That continues to grow as we expand. And the real estate agents are helping us, and we're helping them, because, you know, the houses with broadband and fiber broadband will sell faster than those that do not. And some that do not have it will sit much longer, up to 6 months longer, compared to one that has the fiber.
Absolutely. And again, both of you have touched a lot on this economic development piece, because it's kind of the third leg here of, you know, there's fiber, there's real estate, and then there's economic development, big, you know, kind of big picture with the community. And that's why we wanted to have Josh Seidemann join us. Josh, you're the VP of Policy at NTCA. I know you're also very involved with the Smart Rural Community Program there. So can you just tell us a little bit about the Smart Rural Community Program and what fiber networks mean, big picture, for people who live in these rural communities?
Sure, and thanks for having me as part of this conversation. The two Roberts and Chad have really touched on a lot of what we do at Smart Rural Community. As I mentioned before, NTCA represents about 800 locally operated rural broadband providers. The Smart Rural Community Initiative of NTCA is intended to promote collaboration among those rural ISPs, like the companies we're talking with today, with Chad and Robert, to promote the collaboration of those companies with other industry sector leaders in their community, whether that's education, economic development, healthcare, agriculture, to leverage broadband-enabled solutions to improve outcomes for all of those sectors. We always say you need three things to make a community thrive. It's access to jobs, it's access to schools, it's access to healthcare, but the bottom line is that anyone in that community needs a place to live. And what we've seen in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, and it's been mentioned a couple of times in the last several minutes, is this ability to live anywhere and work from anywhere, and to really see your doctor from anywhere, and to go to school from anywhere, and to thrive, and to be able to build viable and vibrant economies in rural spaces, and that requires broadband. It requires a robust, stable, secure, future-proof, fiber-connected broadband network. I love what Robert and DXTel are doing these days, because one of the things that we learned in the Smart Rural Community Program is that we can share all the great anecdotes about what our members are doing, and many times, if we're presenting that to policymakers, it's a lovely story. It's a nice account of what can be done, but ultimately numbers are what move the needle. And when we start hacking those stories, and we call this numbers and narrative, and we pair those stories, that narrative, with hard numbers, then that is really what makes the difference. That's the FUD factor on the desk of a legislator or a political leader. So if Robert Gilbert talks about having, my gosh, we've got the location data of the fiber, and we've got the home sales data, and as Robert Z said, we can look at the difference in how many days on market are between houses without a fiber connection and houses with a fiber connection. We're suddenly beginning to see a market force that maybe people hadn't thought about. And there have been, it's a bit at a nascent stage in these studies, but there are studies that are showing a positive correlation between home sales prices and fiber connectivity of those homes.
And it's interesting, you pointed out, let's see if I can remember them correctly, the three of the key things in rural communities are access to jobs, access to education, access to healthcare. And since COVID, all of those things can now happen at home, but only if you have good, strong broadband at home. So again, those things have become even more tied together. I'm curious from your perspective, I know you mentioned combining stories and numbers. Do you have any stories that you could share off the top of your mind, off top of mind, that have been smart rural communities who have been able to kind of get the word out beyond just their existing residents to maybe nearby areas or state legislators or whatever the case may be, to actually draw attention to what they're doing? What does that look like?
Well, it's an excellent question, particularly at a time when we have so much federal money, almost at the gate. I mean, we're waiting for NTIA to issue the final rules, and we're expecting those in mid-May. That will govern how all this money that's intended for broadband deployment that's coming out of the Infrastructure Act will get distributed by the states. But what we've seen in iterations of prior federal grant programs is that we have townships that are served by a carrier that's not focused on providing broadband. And typically, this is a carrier that has many service areas, and those service areas might include the big cities of Indianapolis and San Francisco and New York. They're not focused on a small community of 6,500 people. That's not going to, and understandably so, that's not going to deliver the return on investment for their shareholders. So what we have seen are townships that will approach the small locally operated broadband provider that's serving 50 miles away, 40 miles away in another town. And the township will say, listen, we're putting in an application for federal funding for broadband, but we need you to help us build that network. That attraction of having fiber in the ground in my incumbent service area, that goes a long way toward getting the attention of that township. And it makes a difference. We're working on a document now, an issue brief really, that's going to share with policymakers and with townships all the different flavors of business arrangements and partnerships that can form between these rural operators and local communities, whether they're government or rural electrics. But again, invoking the expertise of the rural broadband provider and putting that to work in a community that's not yet connected.
And that's a great answer. Thank you. And I know, Robert Gilbert, when you met with the NTCA Sales and Marketing Committee in the fall, this topic came up with them as well, right? How do we tell the story of smart rural communities beyond the people in the smart rural communities to actually do what Chad and Robert Zuzek mentioned, which is draw people into these communities for economic development and into, it benefits the real estate agent, it benefits the ISP, but it benefits the whole community. Can you just tell us a little bit about that conversation with the Sales Marketing Committee and where you guys landed on what to do about that?
Yeah, absolutely. That, it was, I think when we had that conversation, we on the fiber home side, we had this, vague idea that we knew we wanted to have a website that accompanied the fiber homes Realtor tool. But after we had that conversation and many other conversations with Josh, with Laura, with the SRC members and others, we kind of, it helped us solidify this idea around the website that we're launching next month, Fiber Communities, which, to Josh's point, all of the great work, it's really been aimed at policymakers because that's obviously where the money comes from. But on the real estate side, the way I look at it, and Kaylee has heard me say this a million times, so I apologize. Kaylee's gonna have to hear this again. And this comes from me listening to a lot of sports talk radio. But I read the stat about, by 2025, there's gonna be 36 million plus remote workers. And I kind of equate it to the NCAA transfer portal now, right? Where players don't have to sit out a year. So suddenly the transfer portal recruiting has changed because there's so many players up for grabs. Well, that's kind of how I view these remote workers. You have 36 million people who in 2025 will be able to pick up and move anywhere. So these are potential new residents that are up for grabs for any small town in the country that wants to make themselves known and really put themselves out there. But the one key factor they must have is reliable internet, which I think we all agree is fiber to the home, honestly. So that's how we view fiber communities, and finally trying to bridge this gap between the ISP and the those of us on the fiber broadband side, and then the folks that sit in the economic development offices at the community level, helping them, kind of step out of the traditional, hey, we're recruiting new industry to move here, and really help them, figure out how to leverage this fiber network to drive not only relocation, but as Chad mentioned, tourism. There's a new breed of tourist out there that can take off 2 months and go live on a lake in Wisconsin and work from home. So it opens up so many new opportunities to revive or advance economies in these small rural towns. But it's got to be, marketed in a familiar retail real estate tourism kind of way. And so that's what we've been working with NTCA and Smart Rural Community, and how to really position fiber communities as that website to shine a spotlight on all of these great towns that exist all over the country. Frankly, there's a huge list that I didn't know these places existed until I started working in this industry. And now I have this list. I mean, there's some amazing towns out there that, I think a lot of people would love to know that they could potentially move to and work and probably save a lot of money over what they're spending in a big city right now.
And tell us what that site will look like just from a user experience. I work remotely. If I wanted to pick up and just try something different, a different area of the country, I land on Fiber Communities. What is there for me?
Yeah, we're really modeling it after sites that popped up. Now it's probably about 25 years ago when baby boomers, when that generation started hitting retirement age. And when boomers started retiring, not surprisingly, a lot of them moved from Midwest and Northeast, and they were coming to our neck of the woods in the Southeast. So there was this big migration. So these websites popped up, like there's a site called 55 Places and Private Communities, and other sites that were built to help boomers really research and find the best communities for them for their, when they were going to relocate once they retired. So those sites have been incredibly successful to the tune of, they get over 1 million organic visitors a year. So we're taking a page out of that book and really looking at this remote migration that's happening now and kind of betting on the fact that we are where we were 25 years ago, except instead of just baby boomers, this is a whole new group that can pick up and move. And so we're really building the site in a way that they can just sit down and search by state and find, Cable, Wisconsin, up in Norvado's territory, or Elkader, Iowa, or, just search by state, by region, and find these great towns. And then, we have pages that we've written profiles about the towns, and then can link them off to, the city website where they can get relocation guides and find real estate.
I'm curious, and I don't know the answer to this. Chad, Robert Zuzek, have either of you partnered at all with kind of local economic development committees? What does that look like in your particular towns? I'm just kind of curious.
Sure, this is Bob. In Polk County, we kind of teamed up with and worked closely with the county. There's a lot, Wisconsin's doing a lot of great things in driving broadband, in rural broadband expansion. A lot of money's been spent, a lot of more money is going to be spent, but it's getting the townships, as I heard earlier here, and the counties behind that. So we've worked with Polk County, which is, a big part of the economic development, and their economic development group, in talking to them about what's needed to help us get expansion going. Where do we already have it, so they know where people can plug themselves into? And that is something that they kind of have a community first or broadband first community already plugged into their website. So you can see some of that. And, we're in Polk County, we're kind of a leader in broadband. So Lakeland kind of pops up on that. But as we continue to expand and grow, they've researched the area. They found where there was underserved markets, and that's now where we're looking to continue to expand into to help them solve that problem.
Interesting. So Robert's thinking more from once the fiber is built, here's how you partner with the Economic Development Committee, but you have a great example of how you can partner with economic development to bring in fiber and to be part of that expansion, which is kind of what Josh was touching on too, right? Having it in your market makes you more attractive to others. Chad, what about you?
Yeah, I think we do a number of different things. Some of our employees serve on the economic, committees to help guide and meet their goals. We're certainly involved with chambers of commerce, who often have the same type of overall objective in driving business, into the community. And we're also involved with some of the tourism, because of course we're a really large tourist area. So we, I think we participate well with all of these groups, and in many cases in the towns and the counties that we're in, we're one of the largest businesses, because we're so rural, right? And so having some support from one of the larger companies operating in the area is also always helpful, right? Whether it's from a knowledge or a financial or expansion aspect. I think our participation is, across all three of those.
Yeah, great answer. Josh, I'm curious from you, what kind of advice do you have for your SRCs or for any internet service providers watching this when it comes to leveraging fiber for economic development? What are some just practical steps you'd recommend that they take?
So I think that one of the, and this came up, I think, at the top of the podcast, is the importance of educating both the public and the industry sectors that rely on broadband, and those industry sectors who may rely on it and not realize the type of technology that they're relying on. The FCC, for example, is involved in a proceeding right now regarding broadband labels, to put labels that look like nutritional labels on food onto the bills of broadband customers. And they've had some public hearings, and there are a number of people at the public hearings who are talking about their Wi-Fi speed. But Wi-Fi is the wireless internet I have in my house. Once it leaves that router, and it might be shared by a number of people. I mean, I know, today that some of us are working at home, and we've told our kids not to stream while we're recording this podcast. But I would tell people it's important to educate the public on what that fiber connection is and what that brings to the table, and what a dedicated fiber connection to a school, to a library, to a hospital, to a health clinic really does. And again, that begins to illuminate the possibilities that's out there. And in terms of that smart rural community label itself, to tell people what it stands for, it means that there's an independent national entity that has checked my credentials. They know that we've got a community that is subscribing to broadband. We know that we have fiber broadband deployed to a certain capacity in a certain number of locations in this area, and that we have stated, and we've almost taken a pledge, that we actively work with other industry leaders in our community to identify opportunities to leverage the power of broadband to improve their services as well as our own.
Mm. And Robert Gilbert, I know that you have had some conversations very recently with some PR firms that specialize in community marketing, economic development type of marketing. What have you learned from that you think might be helpful for ISPs and economic development committees to know?
Yeah, we've had some great conversations with a couple of firms that specialize in small community marketing on the economic development side, and they, it's this funny thing where I think everyone realizes how valuable fiber internet is. Whether it's people, community leaders on the economic development side. I think there's been just not a real clear path on, okay, how do we take it and how do we turn this into a marketing campaign, or who cares about this and how do we let them know about it? And so that's what, in talking to those guys, that helped really, again, connect those dots to where it's a real viable campaign. Just like if your town had a lake, you would of course leverage that lake in everything you did, right? So why wouldn't you do the same thing with a state-of-the-art fiber network? And so again, it's taking fiber out of a kind of a theoretical, this is great for the community, and adding this component of, we can really drive revenues. We can bring in new residents into the town. We can bring tourists here, and getting to that ROI that Josh mentioned. We all know one way to really get policymakers' attention is to show them hard numbers, especially when it comes to incumbents who are able to start opening businesses and everything else. So I think it's adding that component that's going to give us, I think, a little bit more ammunition in terms of the ROI of fiber.
So we've talked, go ahead, Josh.
I just want to follow up with something Robert says. I think Robert hit the nail on the head. A lot of people think about the ROI on broadband investment as how many locations did I serve and how many miles of facility that I deploy, but really the ROI is how many businesses could expand their market, how many students have better educational experiences, what was the impact on real estate and the land values in that community. That's really the ROI of broadband. And I think Robert just encapsulated that perfectly just now.
Yeah, great point. And we've talked, a little bit here about how fiber can attract people to your community. And then kind of circling back to the beginning of the conversation, we talk about once they get to your community, how do you get them to sign up for your services as an ISP? How do you get them to know you exist? Because a lot of this relocation is people are coming from urban areas to suburban and rural areas. And a lot of people who have spent most of their lives or adult lives in urban areas don't even really know that there are such things as small community-based internet providers. And so I kind of want to close on a fun story. Robert Gilbert, could you kind of share the Shorty Anomaly? I would say Norvado's example inspired a lot of fiber homes. The Shorty Anomaly was kind of a funny story that came out of WC Fiber that kind of got your wheels turning. Could you share what happened there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say also to Kaylee's point, not only do people moving out of urban areas, not necessarily, they don't really know when we talk about community-based providers, but we all have to be honest with ourselves. We talk about fiber all the time because that's the world we're in. But you ask a whatever, somebody else what fiber internet is, and you're still going to get a lot of, I'm not really sure what that is. I've heard about it. So, there's still a ways to go with the general public. But so we were working with West Carolina Telephone in Abbeville, And Jeff Wilson, their CEO, had this story that, West Carolina's for the last, 5 years, invested millions and millions to put fiber throughout their territory. And a new family moved in from, I think, Ohio, moved to Abbeville, and they actually moved into Jeff Wilson's neighborhood, where at least 3 other employees from West Carolina Tel live in that same neighborhood. And this new family moved 2 doors down, 3 doors down from Jeff. And they were from Ohio. They moved in. The real estate agent didn't tell them anything about internet availability. And they were new to the area. So, of course, they really didn't know who West Carolina Telephone was or anything like that. So they moved in and they saw that, I think it was Spectrum was available. And of course, they were familiar with who Spectrum was. So they signed up for Spectrum. And this, when Jeff Wilson found that out, his head, exploded, and he was thinking, oh my gosh, we've spent all this money, all this time putting fiber, and here my neighbor, just signed up for Spectrum. And, it's funny, but the bad part about it is, when that neighbor, say it's 2 weeks later, and he found out, oh, I could have gotten fiber. Well, he's not going to change at that point because, number one, he's probably in a 1 or 2 year contract. And number two, it's, as we all know who are in ISP on the marketing side, once somebody picks a provider, they're not looking to go through all of that again and change right away. So it is so important when those people relocate to the area to, get their attention and get in front of them as soon as possible, be it through the real estate agent or, through some other means, because once they go with a competitor, it's going to take a while to win them back.
And I heard Shannon Sears call that the Shorty Anomaly because I believe the neighbor's name was Shorty.
I think it was.
But it's not an anomaly at all because we were at our time, when was that, a couple months ago with NTCA, and I heard several similar stories from providers who stopped by and talked with us. One said that they had a new resident move in like 2 doors down from their actual office with the sign out front and went with Charter. And so it's not an anomaly, it's happening, especially in this, relocation time where so many suburbs and small towns are getting an influx of residents who don't know these ISPs exist. So it's an exciting time to be in fiber. I mean, to be in internet, everyone knows that. But it's also a very, I think, pivotal time that those who do the work to attract people to their town will pick up those free agents Robert talked about, those remote workers who are actively relocating, and then those who do the work will turn them into customers as well, and do the work of engaging the real estate agents, educating them, educating the homeowner, educating the economic development committee. I know, Robert Gilbert, your vision with fiber homes and fiber communities is to make that easier, kind of an out-of-the-box solution, but it'll just kind of come down to which providers and which communities leverage that status well and build those relationships and do the work of education. And as Chad and Robert Zuzek have pointed out, do it on an ongoing basis. Thank you to all 4 of you for your expertise, your time today. I think, what you've shared is going to be of incredible value to anyone who listens and can learn from your experience and your advice. So thank you all for your time, and have a great afternoon.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.